Good evening, I'm Greer McGeary, President of Seahorse Victoria. My guest is Deb Lord, the producer and everything for Lance TV, a fellow C31 program. Welcome, Deb.
Thanks, Greer. I'm really excited to be on the show.
Well, it's in some ways it's sort of reciprocal because I was quite pleased to appear on your show last year. And that's one of the things I think C31 and Ben TV in particular and your program in the last few years is sort of giving voice to LGBTI. So that was what I was really interested in talking to you more specifically about, was the idea of Lance TV and what was the aim.
When we started Lance TV, it came out of adversity, and that has been the story of Lance TV, that all this good stuff has happened because something a little bit disastrous had acted as the protagonist. So prior to having the Lance TV show, I was working with Gabriella Labucci over in Daylesford doing some drag shows. I'd crossed paths with a friend of mine called Roddy Ramos, and he is a wonderful ally, and he helped us with doing drag shows over in Daylesford. And the whole time he just kept saying, "You need to put this online, you need to put this online." After a little while, it was all cooking, it was great. And then we were in a rental property, my partner and I are in a rental property in Daylesford, and we got a 160-day notice to vacate or 120-day notice to vacate. And it was like, oh yeah, we'll be fine. And then we couldn't get anywhere in Daylesford, and we were both working in Ballarat, and we were kind of edging our way, looking. Anyway, finally got to Ballarat. We were probably about 14 or 7 days before being homeless. And I went and looked at a property where we are now and went through, and it was like this great, wonderful, went out the back, and there was a big double garage out the back, and out the back of that was a little special extra cave. And I walked into it and I looked and I heard Roddy's voice going, "You should put something online." I'd realised I was looking at the studio, and I started to tell the real estate agent about this, and she was like, "Well, do you want the place?" And I was like, yes, I do. Thank you very much. So out of that adversity came the birth of Lance TV. We started online mostly because Roddy was saying so, but it was also because there's no set venue for us in Ballarat. There's no set LGBTIQA pub, club, cafe, doesn't exist. So the online thing kind of came as a response to that. It gave Gabriella and I this platform to go, let's get an audience this way. And I'm old school, I'm 61 this year. And so I come from the school watching Graham Kennedy, Don Lane, not the Mavis Bramston show. I'm not quite that old, but Naked Vicar.
I can remember Mavis Bramston.
Oh, well, what, personally or?
No, the show.
Oh, okay. Had been watching Facebook and watching Queens beating their mugs or using Facebook Live, and people watching that, and it's like, surely there's more to Facebook Live than just watching somebody do something. So I started to tick over, and Roddy's voice was still in my head. So, yeah, we started doing this program with a beginning, middle and end. That was kind of working. And the shows would go for ages. Like, we would do shows that would go for 2.5 hours, only because no one before, no one after. So we had lots of license. We learned a lot about copyright and how not to use other people's material very quickly.
Yeah, very challenging, that, isn't it?
Yeah. So that was the beginning days of Lance TV, and it was just on Facebook.
Did you think about the broader aspect from not just doing the show, or was the show the primary aspect of it, or were you thinking about how do you involve the broader community of Ballarat?
We really started the show for shits and giggles. That's really what it was about. And then about 6 months into it, it suddenly dawned on me. Somebody was really sharing their life and just kind of, here's my heart and here it is. And it just suddenly dawned on me that, I'm documenting people's stories. Yes. And that's where things changed for me. It sort of stopped being this, look at us, to look at us. This is where things really started to change. So then it became really quite seriously about holding space for all the voices, right? Because for LGBTIQA plus communities, we don't crop up a lot of the time through mainstream media.
Definitely not country Victoria.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
But that's right. I mean, we're there. I mean, clearly there are queer communities and trans communities living right across regional Victoria and possibly even parts of remote Victoria. But with that in mind, it's kind of like, I guess, Lance TV has gone on to be, I guess, a bit of a conduit for people who are living in regional remote Victoria back to maybe some city connection as well. So this kind of little beacon of information sharing, I think.
When you were doing it just purely on YouTube, on Facebook, in the live thing, and you say some days you'd go 3 hours of just making berry, as it were you then sort of conscious of, we must get particular guests on to give their voice an airing?
I would say yes. I would say that I suddenly became very, who should I have on the show? Who should be on the show? Who hasn't had platform to be heard? How do I reach out to people? Lance TV is continually conducting experiments, and one of the experiments we do occasionally is just reach out to some random person around the world who knows nothing about us and go, would you like to be on our show? And we've had some amazing guests, international, like just people who are doing amazing things around the world as well. So being able to, I guess, not only talk about things at our regional level or at our state level or at our national level, but to also compare and contrast what is happening for LGBTIQA plus communities globally.
When I got involved in doing things on Bent TV, originally I came on as a guest of somebody just over 10 years ago now that went to air, but in actual taking on a role of being an interviewer and then sourcing guests. What's your story like, and is how relevant it is to the trans community? And that's basically how I sort of looked at doing it, and trying not to necessarily impose any of my views, although that helps seed conversation, obviously, a bit like what you do on your show. So you've developed this now. You said you worked with Gabriella for many years at Dalesford, and obviously your alter ego of Lance. How did that come about?
Isn't that a story unto itself? Lance came through a series of other incarnations. Through a project that's currently happening up in Sydney called Beyond the Other Side of the Zip, or Beyond the Zipper, which is a drag exhibition put together by Sexy Galaxy up in Sydney for Mardi Gras. I sourced some photos from people and realised that I had an incarnation called Heidi Gherkin, so as a bio queen, right? Nearly 30 years ago in Cairns, where a couple of gay hairdressers, it was Christopher and Joseph, and they were like, oh honey, like we have to do this drag and you're going to come and do it with us. It's like, great, okay, cool. And we became the lip sync dolls, or LSD, and believe me, you would have needed LSD. It was hilarious. And so that was kind of the beginning of me sort of going, wait, there's this thing called performance and I can dress up and just, rehearsals do my head in, but it's fun and let's do this. So there was that early days, and it wasn't until I moved to Darwin around the mid 90s, give or take, that Lance actually came to be. And I don't know why it came to be, but there he was. And he was working with a queen whose name escapes me right now, Laura Gravity. And because Lance plays guitar as well. So Lance and Laura used to do these acoustic versions of 70s disco classics, which, you know, I think we actually got gigs with Zoe Fringe Festival and stuff. Like, it was just the pair of us, just sort of like going, like playing away. It was hilarious for all the right reasons, but it was slapstick hilarious more than anything. But back then, Lance was heterosexual, so, and he would be a tit talker. So he'd be talking to women and just kind of like looking like women started and stopped here. So the turning point for Lance was he came back. Well, I came back and brought him with me, of course. Came back to Melbourne, and I went out to a night. There was a pub. It was the Drag Kings pub at the top of Punt Road. This male friend and I, Tim, hi Tim, went to go and see this Drag King show, which was great. And as we were leaving, Tim just looked at me and went, "Lance should be gay." And I just went, "You're a genius." So Lancey went from being a tit talker to a dick talker.
Clearly, development over the years of having a character. Clearly, as a younger person, you had some sort of penchant to be a theatrical style person, or gregarious type character where you were in your younger day?
When they called me Delta Dawn.
Was that the school nickname, was it?
No. There was a different nickname, and I'll tell you after. You might need to cut this bit out. Look, I was really quite a zesty child, and very much sort of like, what has life got? And, how can I, get into it? I'd always liked a really good laugh. My father, my dad, had such a good sense of humour, and I believe that I am my father's child, with the ability to look at something and to look at it through a lens that's like, yeah, that's pretty slapstick,
My observation of what I've seen of Lance TV is that sort of exuberance comes out all the time. Sort of minimal preparation, as it were, but we know that to do minimal preparation does take time, but there's that sort of randomness that seems to happen through the show. Is that a design feature of?
Or I work with a mud map. It's kind of like, as I said before, there's a beginning, a middle and an end, and we just move through that, however we move through that. I think television in general, particularly mainstream TV, has become quite sterile and quite synthesised in the presentations of things, and I think there's a lot of truth been kind of extracted out of that because of it. And so it's channels like Channel 31 where it's gritty, it's raw, it's not trying to be anything it's not. Channel 31 and the shows on it really don't drive beyond their headlights, which I love, and I apply that to Lance TV. In fact, I don't even bother turning on the headlights.
Now, step into a bit of the background. Now that you've sort of had a few years on live Facebook, made a connection with C31, what was the catalyst to go from that random amount of time that you would be on live Facebook to needing to do a bit more of a structured program for C31?
There's a story with that.
Yes.
So after about 2 years, because we started Lance TV on Facebook, the 15th of July 2017 was the very first show, and the very first words that were spoken on Lance TV at the time were Wadawurrung language by our dear friend Dr. Deanne Gilson, who does our Welcome to Country each episode. So, and I've known Deanne like 40 years or something. The catalyst came about, though, is I actually, because I started to trigger that there was something, it felt as though this thing had legs, and I started to ring around because I kept looking online, looking for other people who were doing what we were doing in Australia, and I wasn't seeing it. And it was like, oh. And then I started to wonder about, could we get a grant? Could we do something? And I rang the Community Broadcasting Foundation and spoke to a man called John, or a person called John. And I was telling him the story and I said, is there some way we can get a grant? And he said, well, he connected to something like Channel 31, hung up, and then went, right, this is the way forward. So got 4 other friends, convinced them to come with me and create an incorporated body. And then so this loose thing suddenly became a little bit more, came a bit more formal with becoming an incorporated body. And then it was like, right, this is the way forward. So once John, hi John, if you're watching, thank you. Once that idea had hit, I then contacted Channel 31 and spoke to Mitch Kalika, who was like, this sounds interesting, let me send you the proposal pack. And because we had like 2 years of a body of work, we were able to sort of complete it. We were very clear in what we were doing, and then went, and here's the link. And by February, so we incorporated in August 2019, and in February 2020 we did our first show on Channel 31 from Ballarat live and simulcast it. So it was so live on Facebook. Channel 31 and simulcast to Facebook. It's the same show except for the ad break.
What I found quite interesting on the appearance that I had was one of the things that TV studios sort of are very good at is giving the impression that it's a big open area. But
you don't give away trade secrets. No. Do not believe anything that this woman says from here.
But how well set up you are in.
Oh yeah, believe everything.
In that little cubby hole, as you said.
Don't believe anything. Sorry.
But it sort of gives you the impression that it's a well thought out set, even though it's like all sets are fairly, by definition, relatively narrow because it's focused on the camera. And you've got your green screen for doing your singy thingy and the like. So I was quite impressed with what you've been able to do. It's really quite impressive.
That's very kind of you. Thank you, Greer. It's besides having a little bit of audio engineering knowledge, I've taught myself the whole lot, like how to white balance a camera, how to focus it, how to light something. Roddy Ramos, who I mentioned earlier in the interview, builds our sets. So, and he works in the industry. So he's a very, very clever man and very loving and very giving. So those sets are Roddy.
You've been on C31 now for almost 4 years.
Yeah.
Oh, time flies.
Must be having fun.
It must be. What's the sort of feedback you've been getting from being broadcast live into Melbourne?
When we began broadcasting to Channel 31, things changed all over again. I don't know how many times I have received an email from someone who has watched the show and the content has basically said, you have saved my life just by existing. And I don't know how many times I have sat in tears with those emails just going, this is amazing. This is beyond now just documenting people's stories, but this is on top of documenting people's stories now, that people are actually watching us, because this weird, very disorganised 1 hour show connects to people and somehow acts as a little beacon of light for people.
I think that's very important, because the style of thing I do, which is having a conversation with you, I found that it acts as a resource for conversations I have when people contact Seahorse, and I can say, well, look, have a look at what's on YouTube, because all the programs eventually end up on there, and you can, one, get to see what I look like, but you get to hear other people's stories and realise that you're not alone. And I think that's a very important aspect of it. But it's also important that I sort of express things a certain way, but it's important for people to listen to many voices, because while we might in effect be saying the same thing, the way you express it might resonate better than the way I express it.
Yeah, and that's the thing I was saying before about holding space for other people and other voices to be heard and to be validated. I think we all move through life as as members of the Rainbow Mafia, hoping to be validated daily. And when we're not, it can be a really dark place for people. So shows like Bent TV and Lance TV, and historically, I think with QTV as well.
Yeah, that's a brief stint.
Yeah, but it was no less important than everybody else, because it was still about representation and holding space and being that conduit between these places.
With all the different voices and what you've set up in Ballarat with Lance TV, what is your anticipation of the next step?
We got a grant in 2021, late 2021, through Regional Arts Victoria, and that was to create a digital community television station, which sits in the cloud. So we actually created that, and in the middle of 2022, we took it for a bit of a test run. So we spent 4 weekends. We ran 29 hours worth of video footage, which was kindly given to us from people who created stuff through COVID. So COVID was very kind to us in that way. Because there was that sudden expansion that everybody suddenly was on Facebook doing shows with a beginning, middle and end. And it was like, this is exciting, this is everything. And Dina Curie was consistently making, here's what you can watch, here's, go here, watch this page. And it was, for me, a really exciting time to watch that on Facebook, because it was like, here we go. And then it was like, all right, everybody can go back to work now. And it was like, gone. And it's just us again. And it's like, I found that process really kind of, wow, like what happened? But so many voices and so many people doing good stuff. So all of that footage that people made, I went back and said, oh, can you give me this? This is what we're doing. And can you give me that? And Kyong's Kings came on board. There was a whole range of people whose names are not coming right now. Suzanne Phoenix gave us a short documentary. We had roller derby. We had all of these different shows. Of course, we had reruns of Lance TV. But it was amazing to be able to put LGBTIQA plus voices all in one space, in one time, various ways being able to present something, which was amazing. And then at the end of the 4 weekends, because we didn't push it much, but at the end of the 4 weekends, we then ran a Survey Monkey and got lots of wonderful positive feedback. So that's still sitting in the cloud. That is a project that we will follow, but we will continue on Channel 31.
We mentioned about how, country Victorian, particularly Western Victoria, being based in Ballarat. What's your broad hope for penetrating even further into country Victoria?
When you look at what the internet is, it's only been around for about 30 years, right? So we're still really at the beginning of the potential of what this thing can do. I mean, we're already looking at the rise of AI, which is both incredible and horrific at the same time. So the potential for the internet is limitless. I mean, when we look at cloud, when we look at things in the cloud, there's no walls and there's no fences in the cloud. It's just infinite. Like, it's not a physical plane like what we're talking on. So the ability for exponential growth over the next 100 years of the internet is amazing. So, and I was saying earlier, like, I love to run a little experiment. So we've done all sorts of things with Lance TV. We've tried to hook up a soft phone so people could call in and, like all of that good stuff. But, to imagine where we will be with computers and the internet, just even in another 30 years from this point.
One of the things that, with Seahorse, that I've allowed Seahorse to sit more in the background in the last 10 or 15 years than it used to be, because you got the likes of TGV and advocacy groups along that line. One of the things that really is, it's about human beings still being human beings. So we need that personal connection. And as much as we'd like to be, better on internet or things like that, it's still that face-to-face recognition of a human being saying, I acknowledge you for who you are, and having that personal contact.
I think as generations move, though, this connection that you're talking about between you and I, which is actually being watched by people on television, so they're watching a screen anyway, and so that's all we've known. We've all grown up watching a screen of some sort. So what can happen in another 100 years? Like, remember the scene from Star Wars where Princess Leia turns up in this 3D going, "Save them, Luke," or whatever her line is there. I mean, is that the future of what computers could be? I mean, we're already looking at some amazing, there's Project Bluebeam, which is throwing stuff into the sky. There's all sorts of things already currently happening with laser technology too, to create these three-dimensional things. So who's to say that the screen doesn't change anyway, and that I'm sitting here with you in a virtual reality in 3D? Who's to say?
Well, that's maybe a possibility for the longer term future. At the moment, in the here and now, as it were, is that we go and leave the studio and we go and catch a tram or jump in the car and stop and get petrol, and you go in and you pay money. You can do it all remotely if you want to, but you go to the supermarket just to have that sense I'm around people. You've got your partner, I've got family and all that sort of stuff, so that there's still that need for a human connection.
For now.
And maybe on that mysterious note,
dun, dun, dun.
Deb, it's been lovely having a conversation with you about what you've done with Lance TV, how it's developed and where it may go to. So thank you very much.
It's been amazing. Thank you so much, Greer, and I really appreciate you holding space for me.
I'm Greer McGeary. My guest has been Deb Lord of Lance TV, a fellow C31 program.